Daniel Campbell is a director of architects Trevillion, working mainly in offices, fit-outs and residential. Dan is a keen cyclist and has taken part in the cycle to MIPIM on a number of occasions. And of course, that will be taking place about now under normal circumstances. So Dan, how has the lockdown affected your workload? And do you foresee there's going to be a nice big spike in jobs when we emerge from the pandemic?
I think the initial reaction was one of great concern with Brexit and the pandemic hitting all at the same time. Certainly none of us could predict how that was going to go. Last year, we had a lot of work that initially came in, I suppose, off the back of the election at the end of 2019. And fortunately, a lot of that work remained in the office. There were a few projects, unfortunately, that stalled. And that we were very busy, in fact, last year. The market seemed to be incredibly resilient, and people's levels of confidence in the slightly longer term were relatively positive. So in terms of all the early stage planning and design work and getting projects prepared for tender, that was very positive. There's some projects that were just at the stage of perhaps acquisition, which stalled. And the other problem that we've all suffered from is work on site. And fortunately, that didn't stop. There was a brief hiatus, but that did continue, but everything's taken much longer. So that's been trickier for us to manage, because obviously with our resource levels and people, you'd expect them to be coming available from projects now, which still have quite some time to run. I think the blockage at the moment we're seeing is the big step to when you go onto site, when the funding has to come through to really commit to those projects. And that at the moment seems to be the point at which people are slightly hesitant. Some projects are taking that step now, and I'm hopeful if we get more good news in the next 3 to 6 months that that will continue. But at the end of last year and the beginning of this, our concern was that perhaps as the projects from the Boris bounce in 2019 slowed down, would there be anything to fill the gap? And actually it's been positive at the end of last year and the beginning of this. And so I remain hopeful that, once we get through this pandemic, things will improve further. And there could therefore be a bit of a bounce back. I think things are going to be very different, and certainly in the work we're doing, we're constantly being asked, to try and think about, what people want from offices and homes and the like. And there's clearly a shift to flexible working and more of a focus on work-life balance and so on. But I don't think this is something that's new because of COVID. It's just something that's been accelerated by the pandemic. And I think hopefully there'll be lots of positives that come from that. I think there's a greater focus on sustainability now. I think there's a shift in the perception of what high streets and retail should be doing. The focus on the quality of office accommodation, housing accommodation, and delivering something that's exemplary. I think that's all going to be a positive thing. And I'm delighted to hear, I think it was last week in the press, there was, for the 6th year running, London was voted the best city globally, the capital of capitals, I think they referred to it as. So I'm very hopeful that despite everything that's happened, London's in a good position, and that we'll all be well placed to move on from this. But time will tell what happens, because there's been so many ups and downs, it's very difficult to predict.
So give me a bit more detail about some of the key projects you've got in the office at the moment.
Well, I suppose it breaks down into 3 key categories. We've got a lot of office work, which people, when I mention that, are quite surprised. But we've got a lot of both refurbishments and re-images of office buildings, as well as new build office buildings. Quite a lot of new residential developments, and also some retail, which is quite interesting. So in the office side, we've we're doing a lot of refurbishment, re-image of existing stock. We've probably got recently developed or in the pipeline or on site now, getting on for nearly 2 million square foot of office refurbishments. And that ranges from the city to Westminster, Camden, Islington, Southwark. And I think that's really, really positive. It's something we're very passionate about. I know there's a renewed presumption now for retention of existing buildings rather than redevelopment. And I think that there are many strong arguments for that, particularly the carbon argument and the embodied carbon argument. And we are doing a lot of work in the background on that to demonstrate the benefits of it, which I don't think necessarily always comes through in pure accreditation like BREEAM and the like. And we're doing it across such a broad range of buildings, you know, from 1920s, 30s buildings through mid-century buildings to actually turn-century buildings, and adapting them all. And they're, you know, considerably repositioning them into very high quality, not compromised office accommodation for future tenants. So that's something we're really interested in. But equally, we've got some new offices, because not every building is suitable for redevelopment. And we look at each one individually, some of them through lifetime carbon analysis and so on, and just because of the compromises of the existing building, the condition it's in, often you find that it is not the best long-term sustainable solution just to redevelop. So we've just secured a planning permission for 247 Tottenham Court Road, which is a really nice mixed-use development with office-led, with retail, some housing and education in that site. There's an interesting project we've just completed on Edgeworth Road, which is 136 George Street, again, which is a mixed-use development for native land and Portman Estate, with residential, retail and office. And we're looking at a site in the city, which is just in for planning at the moment, which is a really interesting project to me, because it's got a very interesting approach to its sustainable credentials in terms of the way we're developing the facade, looking at natural ventilation, mixed mode ventilation, looking at parametric modelling for the facade to reduce solar gain and heat gain to the building, looking at low carbon construction techniques and urban greening, and actually the whole base of the building, reimagining what an office building might be like. So not your traditional reception space, but giving over the base of the building to public and community use with retail, workshops, educational space, community spaces, and so on. So that's a really interesting kind of development that I think we've worked very closely with the city on, and is an interesting template for future buildings potentially. And then at the same time, beyond offices, we've been looking at a number of residential projects. We've got a few projects in Camden, mixed-use residential-led projects, which are great and seem to be in high demand, surprisingly, or despite all the stories of people leaving the cities to live outside. And then we're looking at some student housing schemes, as well as interested in looking at some affordable schemes with local authorities, which is a new thing for us and something that we're really interested in developing. And then on the retail side, there's a couple of interesting projects that we've been looking at, one for Grosvenor down off the Pimlico Road, and another down in Clapham, which is an old department store, which I know is something that a lot of people are interested in at the moment because of what's happening with department stores. And it's the old Arding and Hubs there, and it's a repositioning and reuse of that building to deliver smaller quantity, but more interesting specialist local led retail and leisure at the base, and then using the upper parts for offices. So there's quite a broad range of very interesting projects, all of which touch on some of the important issues that we're all wrangling with at the moment.
So tell me, what do you think of the government proposals to introduce local design codes? One of your buildings was chosen for the Building Better, Building Beautiful report. So you must be on the right lines.
Yeah, we were flattered and very fortunate that our Big Street project made the front cover of that report. You know, I think it was an excellent, well-intentioned report. And off the back of that, obviously, Robert Jenrick announced the local design codes, which have formulated in the white paper, planning for the future. And I think the aims of that white paper are very positive. I think, you know, we'd all like to cut the red tape in the planning system, and we'd all like to improve design standards and incentivize and accelerate high quality developments which are reflective of the character and preference of the local area. And I think if that helps us to improve the quality of the built environment and fast tracks high quality development, as they say, cutting red tape but not design standards, I think that would be a hugely positive move. But my concern is whether that's going to be the ultimate result of these local design codes. You can see that the government think this might be somewhat of a panacea, a one-stop solution to superseding the current guidance and delivering high quality development. And it's a switch from this discretionary planning system that we have now to a more rules-based model. And I think that throws up a couple of questions in my mind as to whether this becomes a modern day pattern book and what the result of that might be. Is this going to be a way to shortcut permissions? Would it provide the opportunity for developers to provide a watered down solution of what it's intending to do, which would have the opposite effect of high quality development? Is it possible in every instance to develop a viable and affordable solution within the rules that are going to be set? And does it lead to a kind of visual monotony? You know, a bit like the US have with their zoning ordinance. And I suppose my biggest concern is it going to be restrictive to progressive design, whether that's in the materials we use, the way projects are designed, the way we can achieve the best levels of sustainability and the like. So a lot of it comes down, I think, to how the codes are written, who they're going to be written by, and will they result in design codes that give the necessary flexibility, fluidity, and evolution that's needed to deliver high quality, forward-thinking design. I think the planning system should not be about red tape, but it is a vital public service that protects us all, and which at its best is proactive and propositional, shaping positive change and making places. And I don't know if there's a shortcut to achieving high quality developments and providing the certainty that we need through the planning process. I think we've got to put the time in up front in order to establish what's the correct solution for any given site. And that will be the case if it's a rules-based system or the more discretional system that we have now.
So Dan, thank you very much for your thoughts and insights, and look forward to seeing you soon.
It's a pleasure, Peter. Thank you very much for your time.